understory vegetation has a huge impact. This is the Adelaide colony. This is where they go on a heat stress event. We have no understory vegetation whatsoever. We have grass and then tall trees. The one up the top, that's Emu Plains. Emu Plains can get up to 47 degrees. The last time they had 47 degrees, they had about 5,000 to 6,000 animals in the colony. They lost 18 because they all get into this understory. This over here is Centennial Park in Sydney. It's got a low-level vegetation, but it has a mid-level understory, and so the animals have to move. They actually leave their colony area and go elsewhere in the park, the same as they do in Adelaide. Their roosting trees are actually to the other side of this area, but this is where they come into when a heat stress event. But the one over here, you can see it's thick with vegetation, so it's shaded. They can get down low. And there are many colonies where you've got just grey headers that you can walk in at the time you can start spraying, and literally there is not an animal more than 2 metres. They're all 2 metres or lower. There's no one up in the canopy at all. Makes spraying really easy. But they're coming into the understory. The impact of understory, this is Cabramatta Creek. In 2002, it was 45 degrees. We had 200 deaths and 25 animals were removed from a colony of about 20,000. We were spraying then, but we had very poor understory. By 2013, they had actually started a bush regen project. They had massive, thick understory. The temperature was higher, but they only had 10 deaths and no animals were removed. That's the difference understory vegetation can make to a heat stress event, which is why it's important that we try, and at this meeting that we were at, we were making contact with councils, we were making contact with people from Queensland who understand the importance of understory vegetation for heat stress events. The more data we can provide on how dramatic these events are, the more inclined they will be to start looking at proper regen projects in order to provide the understory, which eventually will save. You can see that's a huge difference. 10 deaths, no animals removed. The temperature was 46 degrees, but they had really thick understory. And of course, Emu Plains, which is it's a bush regen's nightmare. 45 degrees, 2000, no deaths recorded. 2013, that was the one I said, 47 degrees. There were 18 deaths and 3 juveniles were removed.
Linda, does a body of water right next to their camp make a difference with the humidity in those really high temperatures?
Look, when we're monitoring heat stress events, humidity really isn't an issue. I know that it has cropped up, and we had this talk last night. I was really hoping I would have to talk about it. No, not really. Look, prior to 2012, humidity was never talked about. There was no issue with humidity because, in actual fact, when temperature goes up, humidity goes down. It only has one way to go. You can't have high temperature and high humidity. It's a physical impossibility. So as the temperature goes up, the humidity goes down. Now, we're talking about heat stress events, and heat stress events don't occur until it's about 42 degrees. And all you have to do is go home, girls, and start looking at your weather chart, and you'll find that at 42 degrees, about the highest humidity you're going to see is about 25%. At 42 degrees, we can be as low as 8% humidity. So most camps are near water, some form of water. That's why they're there. They use them for navigation. So it's a natural progression. Temperature goes up, humidity goes down. So, and in actual fact, when the humidity is quite high, the animals actually, the evaporated cooling doesn't work as well. But when we first started spraying and using water tankers and all of that, we didn't even record humidities then. I do it now because you've got people nattering about humidity and spraying. But, and so we're recording that and a few other bits and pieces. But when we were going is, this is how high the temperature is. This is how dehydrated the animals are going to be. They need water. We don't need to change the humidity. We need to give them a drink. They need to replenish their dehydration because they've been doing the fanning, the wrist licking, the panting. They've been doing all that. They've completely run out of fluids, and now they need fluids. So the whole idea of spraying and using water tankers was to provide them with that water. So the water comes up and over them, it runs down their bodies, it's twofold, it cools them down, and they go crazy. And I've got some fairly good photos of them. So there is mention of humidity, heat stress events. If somebody could explain how you can have a heat stress event and 70% humidity, I'd love to know how that could happen. And again, if you start monitoring your own, so when we're talking about spraying animals and using water tankers are used in colonies where you can actually reach the animals because they're the ones. There are some other considerations, but it becomes confusing, and again, we need more data. But I was telling a couple of the ladies last night, if you've got a thick layer of ground cover, means no dirt. You don't have dirt at the bottom of your colony, you have a thick layer of ground cover. If the water hits there, it will actually cool the colony, but it won't create humidity. Same as in our colony, we've got all grass, right? We know where the animals go, and the area is shaded, and so it's a few degrees cooler. We have the sprinklers going all day because it's grass, so it doesn't create humidity. When you've got soil, it evaporates straight out. When you've got vegetation at that ground level, it soaks in, and so what that does is it cools. So you're not actually altering, but again, this is going to come out in further research. Keep it in the back of your mind. If you've got that really nice thick thing there, and there's no dirt, if you're spraying the animals and it's falling down, it doesn't matter because most of the water is going on the animals anyway. But if anyone has anything to add to that, I'm happy to talk about it really. Because these are the problems. You're getting information that's coming out that has no real basis. As I said, humidity was never mentioned. Now, I've been working in colonies since 2002. Numerous heat stress events in, as you can see, Emu Plains, Cabramatta, even long before I went to Adelaide. Well, I went to Adelaide and then the flying foxes arrived. It was never even a consideration. We never even looked at it. We were looking at temperatures and what the animals needed as a result of those temperatures. When the scientists found out what we were doing, without asking us how we were doing it, why we were doing it, they made an assumption that we were altering the humidity by what we were doing. And we are slowly convincing them that at the timing of when we spray and who we're actually spraying, we're not spraying the ground, we're spraying the bats, we are slowly getting them to recognise that it's the animals we're assisting, and we're not trying to make alterations in temperatures and humidities, which is actually impractical to do. And the other thing I said, look, even if that amount of water, okay, it's 12% humidity, and putting water in adds it to 14% humidity. Do we care? It's not going to make a difference so long as we're wetting the animals, because that's our whole aim.
Can I?
Oh, Jesus, it's doing it by itself.
Since you said you're willing to discuss this now, I think in practical senses, well, what I've dealt with a couple of times now is DES, our Department of Environment, advising people not to do any spraying in a colony because it could raise the humidity and cause more problems. And obviously that's a bureaucratic thing of, okay, we're going to take the safest thing so that we can't be, no one can sue us. But in real terms, it's causing a problem for us in not being able to. And like I've got one colony where we have had sprinklers before, and then DES have told council, no, you can't do any spraying because it could raise the humidity, and now no one.
So ask them for their proof.
Right.
Where's their proof?
Yeah.
They don't have it at the moment. Believe me, I was just at a meeting with people that are working on this, and they have no proof. They cannot prove that us wetting the animals is altering the humidity. Because the reality is, it's not. And they'll go in there with all of their little gadgets and everything else, and they will see that maybe there's a 2-degree difference. If they recognise that what we are doing, and if we're not diligent in this, they will accuse us and they will stop us from doing what we need to do. Not that they really will, because I've often said to them, well, you can say we can't go in, but we will. What are you going to do, drag us out? But the reality is, if we can show that what we are doing is of assistance, and this is by recording everything you can on the colonies that you work in on the days that you have a heat stress event, that you are working on relieving the animals. That's what we're there for the relief of the animals. And the main thing that these animals need during a heat stress event is water. They need to drink. They need to replenish what they've lost as the temperature has built up. It also cools them. And believe me, if you do this at the right time, you spray, you go away for 10 minutes, you come back, and they're waiting. Thank you, could you spray me again now? Because it's all to do with timing. Somebody else put their hand up earlier.
So there's always a discussion with Victorian carers and then Queensland carers and things saying that you're meant to treat it differently because of the humidity. So there's no research to back that.
No.
So you just do it the
No,
same.
exactly. Yeah.
Just
Because
very
in actual fact, all right, your humidity on a 42-degree day in Queensland, your low, what you would consider low humidity, which is 25%. So for you guys, that's low humidity, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, is different from Victoria and South Australia because we're a hot, dry climate. You know, if it's 50% humidity, we're dying. So we are, seriously. We just go, oh my God, this is a really bad humid day.
Yeah, my skin flakes off when I go to places like yours.
Right, which is why we drink a lot of water. You'll never see a South Australian walking without a bottle of water. So the humidity is different. It's just not that high. It's relevant to the climate. So yeah, we'll have 42 degrees and the humidity will be 10. But if you're not considering humidity, if that's not coming into your equation and you're looking at supporting the animals, then it doesn't matter if it's 25% or 10%.
I actually went through the numbers. At the most, it's maybe a 5 or 10% difference between us and you, because I went through all the figures back to when they first started recording humidity, which was sometime in the 60s or something. And over 40 degrees, it's the highest you get is about 25%.
Yeah.
And then once you're up to 42, 43, and this is Southeast Queensland, 42 to 43 degree days, you're down to about 12, 15%.
Yes, yeah, about I think you'll see when we were doing the casino one, they were 44.1, and I think they might have been 12, or it may have even been 18. But it was higher than we are, but it was still low for a humid area, that normally has humidity. Yes.
Might be a silly question or point, but with humans, if they're hot, you see all these guys and they're putting sprays and misters in pubs and things so people don't get heat stress, dehydrated. Why can we do that for humans and not do that for these guys?
So you're in a pub, you've got
they've always got the misters on and dance festivals anywhere, sporting events, they'll mist.
Because when you're using it with flying, yes, and so you're saying we should be able to mist the animal.
Yeah, I'm saying you should be able to.
Absolutely. The only difference is, for us, we know that it's hot, and I mean, for us, if it's 36 degrees and 90% humidity, it feels like 38. If it's 36 degrees and 50% humidity, it feels like 36 degrees. I mean, it's so humidity makes a difference for us. But the other thing is we know the misters are there, we know that they're there to help us, and we're happy to walk through them. With the flying foxes, we just have to be careful about the timing because they don't actually know that, and they have to be at their lowest before they'll accept it. But yes, it's an argument
If
that,
they're saying it's a safety issue for
And
the
I
flying
know.
foxes, it's a bit ridiculous.
exactly.
It's
But these
filtered
people have
into.
never dealt with anything with animals anyway. These people who are in the legislation
Yeah.
and things have no idea what an animal's lifestyle is, and they're just.
So we have to prove it.
Yeah.
I mean, we
The problem
can't
is they're
just
telling
say,
council that
we
they
can't
don't do
say, we went into the colony, and Karen said this, Karen Perry-Jones, I think some of you know of her, she was at the meeting, and she basically said, look, I know it works. I've used my water tankers, I know that they got cooled, I know that they got water to drink, but I can't prove it. You know, there was 2,000 died the year before when we didn't, but only 200 died. Well, what were the variables, blah, 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 blah. What we have to do is prove it. So yes, you'll be next, yes?
Sorry, just the comment with the misting. The fact is, for people, and as a southerner I can attest to this, the misting doesn't work unless there's a fan going, which places who provide misting usually have fans in pubs and all that sort of stuff. I know myself, I'm from Tasmania, I suffer in it up here.
Yeah.
I can sit in front of a fan with a spray bottle. I can be completely saturated and still hot
Yes.
if the fan isn't enough.
Yeah.
So, I
And
mean,
the thing is, what we're doing here too is, the bottom line at the end of the day is we're providing fluids. Their bodies are depleted of fluid. We need to, and they can then start reusing the mechanisms that they need to cool themselves. The fanning will work because they're wet again. So the fanning hasn't been working since it was about 38 degrees. They've got more fluids to be able to start wrist licking again, even the panting. Look, we spray them and some of them are so contented by that stage that they just wrap themselves up and hang by one leg. Yes.
Yeah, because by the time we start spraying, the weather's going to change eventually soon anyway, because
Yes.
they're already at the bottom.
Yes.
They can't go any further down.
Okay, we'll have one more question on this and
I
then
just
we'll have
wanted
to.
to ask, where do you think that the whole humidity theory came from?
It came from the researchers.
That if
Oh.
they had been researchers, you know, they
Shouldn't they have used evidence in the first place?
Hello, Sylvia.
Probably wasn't part of the.
I just realised it was you.
It would be great to bust these myths because
Yes.
the department they
Yes.
they seek out information from somewhere, somehow, and we can ignore what they say anyway. But
Yes.
it'd be good to actually bust this myth once and for all.
Look, if your council's saying that, the one thing you can say to them is, where's the proof? You show me the research documentation that we are raising the humidity and we'll be happy not to walk in there. Because doesn't exist. The researchers themselves will tell you that. They don't have it.
But even if it raises, like you say, if it raises
Yeah.
humidity, what's the issue?
Yes.
Anyway.
What we
What's
have to
the
show
evidence
is,
that
what we have to show, and we do need to do this to look like we actually know what we're doing, is we have to show that we are targeting the animals. We have to take humidity off the table. We are targeting the animals at the right time, and we're providing them with fluids and cooling them. Now, we've got to concentrate on that area and let them play around. I will have another talk to Justin about, obviously you guys are having a lot more problems with your councils than we are in New South Wales, because I still communicate a lot with the New South Wales people during these things.
Well, it's funny because one of the councils on the Sunshine Coast has actually installed sprayers.
Yeah, I know.
So they've obviously got DES blessing, or they're talking to the right person, whereas my
It's
council
a trial,
is
yeah.
refusing
Councillor, you
to.
would-
It's a,
Okay, Moreton Bay is pretty good.
it's a
Moreton Bay
trial,
Council's good.
Well,
that
ours is
one.
good, but they're saying they're being advised by DES that
Oh.
they can't. They put it sprinklers years ago.
Yeah. Well, actually, we best move on, otherwise
Yeah.
we may end up Okay, now the other thing is, remember when I said all of the different factors? And if we've got time, we will come back to this because it's a problem and it's confusing. Remember I said body condition also has an impact on how the animals will survive. So 65% of the females recorded during the Adelaide 2019 heat stress event were under the average body condition of females from previous January, February data. And 52% of our males were also under average condition. We're lucky, we've got some research projects going on in the Adelaide colony, so there were researchers down there trapping animals, weighing, measuring, collecting data, and they're doing other things as well. Plus all of the animals that we get in for rehab, as soon as they come in, their weight, their forearm is done, and then we do a body condition on them. And so therefore we can now, so these animals were actually at the lowest body condition since they arrived in 2010. And that was because we didn't have enough flowering through summer. We knew that there was going to be a problem. Our babies were in terrible condition. It started around about November and continued to be a disaster. So yes, we knew that there was a problem with their body condition. So another thing where you need to be very diligent. Your animals come in, you do weights, you do forearms, you look at the conditions of your babies, and I'm talking about anything from 50 grams above that we would consider in poor condition, 50 grams underweight. 30, 20, that's pretty normal. Why did I put this in? Okay, this was, so we had a high number of, I have to remember why I put it in. So you can see that we did have a higher number than usual of adults dying in this, certainly compared to, we had 525 juveniles, but we had a large number of males and females, and if you look up there at 618 juveniles, we only had 9 females and 0 males. So you can see that the low body condition had an effect. And this is the sort of data. So we looked at this. So these are the sorts of data. So we collected on every month of the year. We compared the body conditions of the females that we were able to process and the males. And they were much, as I said, 65 and 52% were lower. Also, you, again, if you're going to understand this, you're going to have to know what they're eating in your area, and you're also going to have to make sure that you do a weight and a forearm measurement on every animal. And you're all aware of this, aren't you? Does everyone know what this is?
No.
Okay, this is recording. Okay. So you have an animal that comes in with a 158 millimetre arm. If you want to see what sort of condition it's in, is it this one? Yep. You take off the 1 and add a 0, 580 grams. So you use that as your guide. So if you had an animal come in, it had a 158 millimetre arm, but it weighed 480 grams, then that tells you how it's 100 grams underweight. That's an approximation. It just gives you a general idea of body condition. And so again, if you've got a 145 millimetre arm, then you're expecting the animal to be in the vicinity of 450, 168. The adults can be a bit iffy, but it gives you a general idea. Yes?
Obviously, we're in a heat stress, they're going to be dehydrated. Are you correcting that figure for dehydration?
Yeah. When they come in and they're dehydrated, the amount in an adult is minimal when you're looking at body condition. So, you know, even if it's 20 or 30 grams less, even 50 grams, and then it depends on the size. You can have a male, 175 millimetre arm weighing 880 grams. During the heat stress, he's dropped down to 830. That, when you do these, that kind of difference doesn't alter that much. But yes, we're obviously aware of the fact that they're going to be slightly less. Yeah. So body condition, and of course the other thing that affects the animals is how long So this sort of tells you the duration of the event. So this side is the number of hours that the temperature was equal to or greater than 40 degrees. And you can see we don't have any problems, you know, half an hour, 1 hour. But when you get down to the bottom here, 8.5 hours, 7.5 hours, you can see that how long the temperatures stay high will also have a huge impact. Is that fairly obvious? Yes. And then we have our extreme events, Kyogle. That was the very first one that I was ever involved with. It was a colony of 5,000 and we lost 3,500 of them, black sand glade. Cabramatta Creek in 2001 lost 2,000. Dallas Park, as I mentioned before, 1,500. Coffs Harbour in 2002, 6,000. Singleton, unknown, but it was massive. They were so frantic with the survivors, and it's a colony like Adelaide, it's in a park, but the death rate was huge. But these all have something in common. 2013 Bomaderry, southeast Queensland, you had 45,000 on a single day. And then of course you had northern Queensland. These extreme events have one thing in common. Does anyone know what it might be?
It was hot.
It was hot, it was very hot. These were really extreme events. Nobody knew they were happening.
Lack of response time?
Yeah, they didn't know they were happening. By the time they got in there, it was all too late, and this is the consequence of that. You've got a window, and when you miss that window, then you have animals dying. However, we did have two events. Casino in 2014. Why I'm putting this in is you can have extreme events. You can know that they're coming. I'm not sure that the casino girls knew how bad it was going to be because there were some things they weren't monitoring. And ours, we were very aware, and yet there was still nothing we could do. Casino had high temperatures, rapid rise, strong winds, and blacks. All of those things impacted on that particular event. And of course, Adelaide had record high, it was the record high temperature. We'd never had a temperature that high. It was the highest temperature on record. And we had poor body condition, and we had a long duration. So those factors sometimes can influence the event to the point where there's nothing you can do but pick up the pieces. So you are still going to have those events regardless of how organised you are. All colonies will experiencing heat stress events will suffer losses, and some of them more than others. How many animals die will depend on knowledge that an event is imminent, how high the temperature, the number of added factors impacting the colony, how well we understand and read the animals we are trying to support. We must be part of the solution, and we need to leave our emotions at home, because that's when we make the biggest mistakes, and that's when we actually put more animals in danger, is when we act more with emotion than, let's say, okay, somebody said that, it might have been the other guy, stand back, take a deep breath, look at what you're doing, don't rush in, because that's when you will make a mistake. These are horrible situations. When we have heat stress events now, what we do is a week or two after the event, everybody, or as many people who want to come, will go to Sue's, and we'll all have a good cry, we'll, support each other, give ourselves a pat on the back, look at what we achieved, not what we didn't, and we can't stop the deaths. We can do our best, and then we can also look at what we achieved, we can also look at what we learned, and we can support each other. So it's just something that we tend to do. Will you let me know when you want to have an afternoon tea break? I'm not watching the clock, I'm watching the slides. So whenever you want to have a break, just let me know.
Yeah, maybe just 5 minutes to get some water.
30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay. I think some people wanted it earlier.
No drinks for me.
Yeah, no drinks for you.
Gents, man,
Go and grab
just
yourself.
ignore it, take a break.
So this can be achieved through organisation and timing. One of the biggest things though that you guys need to be doing is actually monitoring on high temperature days. Not a heat stress event, but a high temperature day. So any day that it is recorded that it's going to be 38 degrees or above, you need to start monitoring the colony. Now, there's some sheets that I've got in the back of the notes that you'll get where you can record behaviour. That's when do they start, fanning, when do they start panting, when do they start moving, when do they start wrist licking. There's also a place for comments. But what you need to do is you need to have two people or somebody with very good eyesight. You need to have one person monitoring the blacks and another person monitoring the greys. So then you can also compare the behaviours. If you're going into a heat stress event, you've got two species and you want to be organised, you have to know the colony you're going into. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful. They move, even though it's not a heat stress event, their behaviour changes at 38 degrees. They will move. Our colony moved into the scratchy pine and blah, 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 under the thicker vegetation. They do alter their behaviour. It's just that they don't need to go any further because that's enough. But you need to watch that, see where they go, what they do, what colonies will go into the lower vegetation, what colonies will move to a completely different area. Yeah.
And don't forget they may exceed where you're expecting to find them, because remember when we started finding them across the river and we
Yes.
didn't even know.
Yeah, but that's never happened again. Only on that one occasion, and I think it was because they were new bats in the colony.
But even on the 46-degree day, they were all along the torrents.
Oh, they were then. They were using the torrents for water and using the trees along there to. I've got a great slide at the end.
Another reason you're talking about monitoring is working out where the different demographics are. For example, the mothers with babies will be in a certain area and they'll respond earlier. They'll start doing all those behaviours too, so that's another breakdown.
Yeah.
And that can be a sensitive area that you then monitor.
It would be good to be able to monitor that. We've found that 38 degrees, often what will happen is if they move, and it depends on the month. If they were to do it in November, the babies would all still be stuck with their mothers. But if they do it even though we're not having a heat stress, we're just having a high temperature day, the mothers and the young will always be separate. They'll be hanging side by side. But it does give you an indication that that's occurring. And again, keep looking at the month. What month are they? How old are the animals likely to do? And you'll get a general idea of age by the number of babies you've got coming into care. What ages are they? So that'll give you, and if you know what colonies, although you have probably a bit of a difficulty knowing exactly which colony they came from, seeing as you've got so many reasonably close to each other. But there's lots of things you can use. So every colony is completely different. You've got vegetation differences. You've got access. Some colonies you can only go in with spray equipment. Some colonies, because of the low understory, you can't use tankers. We even have trouble with sprayers, although we've got new ones now. That's a tanker in at Cabramatta Creek. What resources are available, how many volunteers, what equipment you've got, and what kind of support outside your carers, and that's something that you also need to develop. So there are those sorts of things that you will need. Okay, so now we're getting into what they do. So up the top here, that's what we call a normal roosting position. When we first started, we just called them stage 1, 2, and 3. You can give them whatever names you want, category 1, 2, 3, whatever you feel comfortable with. But to us, this is stage 1. That's normal roosting position up the top. Now they're starting over here to cluster. And that normally happens around for us, about 10 to 12. Now, they need no assistance whatsoever. They've only just started to make their move to where they're going to. And we have had people that have tried to spray at that time and it has been a total disaster, and one of the reasons that they were going to stop carers from coming in. Yeah.
So at that point when they first start the cluster, have they moved down yet?
Yes.
Right, so
The
they're
greys
starting to
have,
make their way
not
there.
necessarily the blacks.
Yeah.
The blacks won't be moving down basically in, they'll be coming down a bit further, but they won't be as low as the greys.
Yeah.
The greys know exactly what they need to do. All we need to do is give them time to do it and hope that they've got the vegetation and around them to be able to do it. The blacks are going to clump higher up, and they are going to be, if you can try and record this data and document this data, then when you go in, like we've got equipment that will actually reach about 40 feet into the air. Now we had to buy this from America. They cost $200 for them. Simple, easy things to use, but they'll shoot really high. Now if you know that this is as far as your blacks are coming down and you're going to have a lot of trouble getting any water to them, two things are going to happen. You're going to have a high death rate in your blacks, or you're going to have some sort of equipment that you can actually reach them. And again, until they learn to come down even lower, and hopefully that happens sooner rather than later.
Do you have any guesses how long it takes for them to learn that?
Oh, well, there's a colony up north where she reckons, and there's blacks and greys, the blacks still won't come down as low as the greys, but they come down low enough now to be sprayed. And that took 3 years of having a high temperature day, 3 years in a row. You wouldn't have called them heat stress, but they were high temperature days. They did need some assistance, and she was certainly able to give that to the greys, and it wasn't until last year that the blacks, but they still didn't come down as low, but they came low enough to be sprayed. Okay, so this is what we call stage 1, and we're looking at from about 10. So we get people in, usually somebody starts monitoring the temperature, as I said, about 6 or 7 in the morning. That's monitored regularly. People will go in at 10 depending on what's happening. And then we just keep monitoring until 12 and see how it's all going. More people will then go in at 12. Now this is stage 2. We've got some risk lifting happening. We've got, now they're clumping. They're getting really, really close together. They're going for the trunks. They're going, you can see it's actually more shaded in there. So they're trying to get into the most shaded areas. I've got more on this again. This is stage 2. They're coming together more. They're coming to the sides. See, look at this one. They're all on one side of the trunk. They're all hanging together, and it's getting pretty hot in there, but you still can't approach them. Especially these ones here. They'll start going up. They haven't finished coming down yet. They haven't finished what they needed to do, and we know this colony really well, and we know where they're going. So we're waiting for them to get there. So basically, what's happening in this cluster here is, can you see these two animals on that one above? See how much cooler the trunk is? So if you look at this gauge here, you can see that the darker the purple there, the cooler it is. So the bats are still pretty hot. They're just moved down. But the area that they're occupying is much cooler. Once you spray that animal, it's in the coolest area, you spray it, it's probably a degree or two less than what the highest temperature is by the time they've finished doing what they need to do. Okay, so now we've got to stage 3. This is a riverbank here. They were actually the animals, I should have it. That's them, right? They were there, now they're there. That's stage 3. There is about 50 animals under those logs. They're hanging into the creek. You can see the shade. See what they're seeking? They're seeking the shade. They still may be damn hot, but you can see their shade seeking. They will also do it under lots of foliage up in the trees when they first start. So this is what we call stage 3. And again, see they're right over there, and you can see that it's more shaded there. That's what they're aiming for. That's when you can start spraying them. You can walk up to them. They're not that high up. These guys obviously are really easy to get to. And this is where the water tankers are. On the other side, that's a creek. It's not very wide. The water tanker is higher, up high, and it sprays down onto them. And at Cabramatta Creek, I think I've got a diagram. I'll show you where the tankers are. You use two, one on either side, and they spray all the way down onto these animals. They're in the coolest area of the colony. We've given them time to get there, and now they're at a stage where they can be sprayed.
Are you spraying above them, or are you spraying directly onto them?
Above them.
Above them and
Yeah.
just letting it fall down.
The reason we always start above is just to make sure they don't start to climb up.
Okay.
See, once you spray, it's coming from above, so they're less likely to turn and go, even though they probably won't. And then the water runs down them, and then all of a sudden they go, all they're interested in doing is licking the water off them. Okay, so again, the first, when you see that, see how it's much more shaded? It's thick. There's actually a lot of understory through there. You got animals laying on the ground. And what is your first instinct when you see that?
Pick them up off the ground.
Go and pick them up, yeah. There they are, panting. They're in stage 3. We have got, I think there were 3 dead on the ground. The rest of them were, so they were sprayed. The dead were left, they're dead. You try and go in there, even if they were, still alive and practically on death's door, you are not going to go in there and save 3 animals and disturb 40. Because we're here to assist. We're not going to stop animals from dying, but we need to be able to, our actions will decrease or increase that number. You must have a clear objective of what you want to achieve when you're going in. Save the few, support the many. And obviously we want to support the many. So, what are these animals doing? Again, can you see where they are? It's cooler. This is the time when they've got to the... it looks bad. That's the problem. It does look bad. They're on the ground, they're panting, they're wrist licking. And of course, they're flying foxes. They're near the ground. It's, it's a really unnatural place for them to be. These are all juveniles, I might add. So that's before spraying. And see the colour of the bat? He's obviously in a fairly hot area, but if we put him there, so that animal's now been sprayed, it's practically the same temperature as its environment. So it's assisting. The area's cooler, we've cooled the animal, we've given him water to drink. So that's after spraying, so before, after. We have assisted, and that animal was it was. So again, you've got all of this. Now this is what happened. Flying foxes seek out the coolest elements of their environment. This illustrates that if you approach the animals too early, forcing them to leave these cooler places, then their thermal exposure will increase. The one thing you don't want them to do is to start to move higher. You want them to stay right there so you can get to them. Okay, which animals are sprayed first? Yeah, you spray from the top and bring it down. Once they're all licking, and believe me, they will all be licking, some of these ones that are on the ground will actually come up a bit higher and start hanging on these little twigs. They'll start licking, and then if you can see animals within that group that look more distressed than others, you can be more specific. If you've got a light spray, not a heavy one obviously, you can spray the animal more directly. You can get them to sort of spread out a little bit more. They will do that naturally, and then you'll be able to see and target. What happens is they get sprayed, the people move on to a different section, and then they keep coming back, making sure that they're okay, yeah?
Sorry, so this is when you go, obviously go in for the greys. What if you've got blacks in the same camp?
That are up high,
Yeah.
yep. Hoping no one would ask me that. Look, I have pondered that myself, and I don't know how, I don't think you're going to find that the blacks will move, and so you will adequately be able to help the greys that are low, and hopefully over time encourage the blacks to do the same thing. Once you've walked in, if you haven't got your blacks moving and these guys have been sprayed, just look up and see if you can reach any of the blacks. But it is, I don't envy you guys at all. It is going to be a balancing act. But again, if you can get more data on each of your colonies and what they do. The other thing that Sue was telling me, that there are some colonies where they can tolerate reasonably high temperatures and some colonies that can't. You're going to have to try and target the ones that probably will survive or have a limited amount of deaths, and concentrate on those colonies, because you don't have the resources to be able to target. And seriously, all of this stuff sounds great in theory.
The blacks do come down, like Charmaine, you saw it at Kilcoy, how and when did they come down?
Oh God, I've seen so many of them.
I mean, I've seen that they're down about 2 metres or so.
They're sprayable.
Yeah.
So I think what you're going to see in the short term, over probably the next few years, is that there will be a variety of different behaviours depending on the colony, depending on the animals that are in there. So look, as far as I'm concerned, you've got to, if you can help animals and the blacks are still up there, go for the greys. I mean, these animals can all be saved. If you don't hose them, they will all die. It's that simple.
So I guess the question is if we do have blacks and greys, and we do go and spray for greys, and the blacks fly off or the blacks move, what is the question against people who are spraying?
I know. Look, honestly, I don't have an answer for you. I really don't. I mean, I just think you have to. But I've got a feeling. Okay, so you've had colonies, Charmaine, where there's blacks and greys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've had a heat stress event where animals were dying.
The colony I know the most doesn't have a heat stress event, probably because it's a coastal one.
Yeah, the coastal.
Right
Yeah.
The ones that I saw the most of, the animals were all dead when we got there. The 14 one.
Yeah.
And the next one was a couple of years later, and the blacks were falling 50 metres from the ground, and if they weren't dead on when they left, they
were by the time they hit the ground.
Yeah. So
see, they won't. If you've got the colonies and they won't come down, you can't help them. It's really that simple.
What if you do have something that could reach them?
Yes, well, we because of our colony, the lowest animals are probably 30 feet from the ground in South Australia, and we had a hell of a time. Danielle actually went to Toys R Us and bought a super soaker.
Yes.
That worked great. But that only went about 20, 30 metres?
Yeah, and I had to buy several of them, and you had to make sure it was the longest range one, and
Yeah.
most of the other plastic toys. They
only lasted for one heat stress event, then they were wrecked.
you have to run around with a bucket of water beside you too.
Yes, but with the ones that we've bought from overseas, they will go 30 to 40, and that's as high as we so far have been able to.
You've talked about these, what you bought from overseas, but you haven't actually explained what it was.
Oh, it's a sprayer. Like you know how you have your backpacks or your hand sprayers, and they've got this long sprayer thing. Okay, they're exactly like that. They're about that long, but they're metal. But they're not that heavy, so they're pretty heavy duty. Now what they've got is they've got a cord, like a tube attached to them, and you have to take in with you a container, you know, one of those, whatever, 5 litres, or no, it's more than that, 20 litre thing. So the guys carry those. You put the tube in and you just pump it.
Oh, the old-fashioned sprayers.
Yes.
You're kidding.
And it's
Like the
amazing.
fire.
It goes up about, but we weren't able to access them here. They're quite long,
Yeah.
and the spray is massive that comes out of them, and we have to spray above the animal so it runs down them. But yeah, that's all it is. I nearly died when I saw it. They paid $200 each for these. I said to Sue, you know, and I'm expecting some, you know, huge, amazing thing, and there's this big thing with tubes attached to it, but it works. For our colony, it works amazingly.
So Linda, given that you can spray them earlier because you can spray higher, are you doing that, or are you waiting until they're showing the signs that they?
Yeah, no, they have to be, even, they wouldn't be that low until they were in stage 3 anyway. And if we try them, they're still flighty. Oh, I can't see you.
No.
They will still move. They have to be literally at their lowest, both physically and their position. They have to be in that condition before they will allow you to do it. Otherwise, they will start moving. Now, at stage 2, with some of those clumps or clusters, you can start approaching them and see if they'll accept it. And some of them do. But as soon as you see them even look like they're going to move, you back out of there immediately. So you can certainly attempt what you're watching at stage 2. If we go, might have to go back too far, but it may be worth looking at. Okay, that's... Okay, so at this stage here, you may be able to, but you've got to remember there's still bats above. So we've found stage 2, if you've got a lot, no, don't have any above, but most of them are sort of lowish, then you can approach those and see if they will take the water. But as soon as they move, you really do have to back away. Yep.
Sorry, I know I'm bugging you.
No, please, that's why I'm here.
If we've just got blacks, when do you start
Oh, well.
trying to spray?
Yeah, well, when you figure that out, let me know. Look, all you can do is monitor them. If they get to a point where you can get water to them, then do it. But
So at what stage?
it'll always be stage 3, but it's just that they won't be that low.
So
But they will be their lowest. But if you've got blacks and you've been monitoring that colony on high temperature days, you will know where they will be. So if on a high temperature day you've been monitoring the colony, if you've noticed they've gone from high canopy to mid canopy, and you know how high that is, then you can predict that they will come slightly further down when it is a heat stress event day. So you will already have an idea. It's only when we go into the colonies and we've got no idea about what we're going to be seeing that the confusion comes. Do I do it now? Do I do it later? Do I do it? And again, I mean, the blacks are a problem. But I think you have, if you can get people to, even if it's just a few high temperature days, to go in there and record the behaviour and record where they were, then when that event happens, then you've got a much better chance of being able to figure, and you know, okay, at 38 degrees they were here, when it got to 40 degrees they were here, and that was as high as it got and everything was fine. You can then sort of say, well, they may even come a bit lower when it gets to 42. And then note the height that will be. What have we got that can help them? And like somebody was just saying, the blacks will just stay there and literally drop dead from the canopy. Because they're already past it.
You ended up making most of the point I was trying to make, but again, I think the answer to that is know your colony. But I'll use the example
Absolutely.
some ones in my
I'll get
local
out of
park
this
a
pit.
couple of weeks ago where it's 41 degrees, but everyone was pregnant, so I was monitoring, and I ended up spraying. It was in somewhere where people walk past, like a metre or two away from the bats all the time, and there were some about probably 3 metres high, and I was able to just spray them from where I was on the walkway, and they were fine. Like they were just like, oh, it's raining, okay. And you know they weren't worried at all. So if you know you can answer those questions for
And
yourself.
you can move in at stage 2, and you'll all have a manual, so you'll be able to see these photos and get a better idea, I guess, of but you can move in earlier, never in stage 1, but when they're sort of, coming down to that certain level, you can move in and see if they'll accept it. The thing is, if they don't, walk out, because you know it's too early.
How well do they tolerate like loud noises from things like generators and all that
Yes,
stuff?
when they're in stage 3, they don't really care.
Okay, I mean, you can get good attachments on like gurneys, and you can get a really good range on one of them to create like a really fine mist.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether something like that would be worthwhile. For
We
somebody
normally,
that's up high.
anything that's going to make a really loud noise, you're wanting to do that when they're really not, when they're at that stage 3. Because if you can get the noise happening and the water quickly onto them, it won't bother them. We've had no problems, and this is not to say you won't, especially if you've got new arrivals. This is where it's important to know your colony before the event happens, because then you will get some flying. But at least you'll know that they're the new arrivals that are most likely. Others are all staying put. Even when you are going to bring in these noisier equipment, there will be some animals that will fly. So long as it's a small proportion of what's happening, you're trying to assist as many animals as you can so that less animals die. If you do nothing, they'll all die, or a very large percentage of them will die. So again, it comes down to some common sense, observe what the animals are doing. We were fortunate that the colonies that originally started with the heat stress events, which was for us Cabramatta and Emu Plains. We also had the Gordon colony, but the Gordon colony also had it was a huge big colony, something like 18 hectares or something, and not acres, we're talking hectares here. And massive vegetation, and they very rarely, I think they've had about 1 heat stress event. So we had already been into these colonies for years prior to the events happening. And the first one that happened, we didn't even know it was happening either in 2008.
Can I just ask, how many people do you usually, because you're talking about certain colonies, how many people do you usually have in there working, helping these animals?
Okay.
Because we have so many colonies in here in Brisbane.
Well, but I'm getting the feeling that a lot of the colonies aren't very big, not more than maybe
Not anymore.
5,000.
Sometimes are,
Yeah.
but, I'm just wondering how many people do you usually have coming?
Well,
in
for
those
20,000 animals, we had 10.
levels? Yeah, 10 people. Okay.
Yeah. So, I think I've got something on that.
Linda, I apologise if you've already answered this.
No.
Why do more juveniles die?
Oh, because they're for their
Surface areas,
yes,
body weight.
thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So they can't, they get dehydrated fast, they can't dissipate it properly, and because they're
It
tiny.
depends
Yes,
on the
thank you.
species and the location too, doesn't it? Because down south they have more juveniles dying, and up here we have more mothers dying. Generally.
Yes, but again, we've got to look at, and I was going to talk to you more about that, but to sort of, because normally we'd have to look at the months that you saw this and the species that you saw this in, whether it was more blacks, more greys, because generally speaking, most, other than extreme, when you have those extreme events that where I said 6,000 died, 4,000 died, whatever, you will get a much higher percentage of adults dying in those. But temperatures are massively high. There's been no assistance. Some of those colonies may be lacking the right understory. They haven't been able to get to a better area. There's one colony, the only way you can get to it is by canoe. It's there's not a lot of equipment that you can bring in on a canoe.
But you don't have to carry your water with you.
That's very true. Very true.
And travelling by canoe is in the safety manual as well, so.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're stopping for a little break.